My name is Ranjan Adiga. I teach in the Literature, Media, and Writing program here at Westminster, and I also curate the reading series. With the help of an endowment, the Anne Newman Sudden Weeks reading series invites poets and prose writers to Westminster for an evening of literary reading and conversation about topics that are urgent, important, surprising, and sometimes controversial. We're also happy to collaborate with Utah Humanities, a partnership that I hope will provide many opportunities for readings and panel discussions in the future. Today's event features readings by Stacey Shannon Denetsosie and Matty in Glasgow. I discovered our first reader, Stacey Denetsosie's story collection, The Missing Morning Star, a few months ago, and I was blown away. Her stories offer very close and intense portrayals of Native lives in the contemporary American West. In a world filled with everlasting consequence of settler colonialism, violence, and cruelty, the characters in Denetsosie's stories navigate through daily struggles by being funny, smart, irreverent, and finding love even as they grapple with difficult decisions. Author Kinsale Drake describes Denetsosie's voice as at once thunderous and tender. And the stories are just so fun to read, often suspenseful. In the title story, for example, a gas station clerk witnesses the kidnapping of the newly crowned Miss Northwestern Arizona, leading to a nail-biting but deeply reflective ending. Honestly, once I started, I could not put the book down. Stacey Denetsosie is a member of the Navajo Nation. Her work has appeared in many publications, and The Missing Morning Star is her debut story collection. She holds an MFA in fiction from the Institute of American Indian Arts, and she currently lives in Logan, Utah. Please join me in welcoming Stacey Shannon Denetsosie.
Thank you. That was such a great introduction. I really appreciate that. I'm excited to be here with you guys today, reading from my short story collection. And this is my short story collection. I published it with Torrey House. And I want to read a story that I haven't read out loud since my MFA program. And this one is called Casket in the Backseat. Casket in the Backseat is the story of a grandson and his grandfather who has passed on. And they have this conversation as Leo is returning to his grandfather's funeral. Okay. Leo. Who dies on a Tuesday under the watch of 4 nurses during a routine dialysis appointment? An Indian in a border town clinic, that's who. Chiche would have never imagined that I'd stay in Salt Lake until he passed away. Leopoldo, you live up there, why? He always referred to Salt Lake as if it were a foreign place far from the Navajo Nation. To him, it ought to have been a far-off place outside of our 4 sacred mountains. That same damned place his daughter ran off to at 18 to assert her independence until she cowed home, heavy with me. She stayed gone for the first 6 years of my life, but still I went searching for her. I strayed all over Che's property the moment I learned how to walk, exhuming old hairbrushes from dusty glove compartments, breaking into the faded blue Chevy truck she drove in high school, finding bleached paperback romance novels she'd left in a green milk crate under the bed. I guess it worked too, since that was the last fall I spent with Che. He walked in while I was meticulously arranging Mama's relics in my bedroom. I smoothed down the threadbare orange shag carpet to place a swollen but dried sketchbook of hers that I'd found underneath the bench seat in the old Chevy. Sure. What are you doing, boy? Che asked with a grin. Bringing Mama home. I pressed down the corners of the lumpy sketchbook. Che darkened a deep shade of crimson. He didn't turn this color often. This redness was typically reserved for the mutton stand guy who always overcharged him. On this day, he wore this color differently as he appraised all the items on the carpet, rubbing his salted stubble. "I'll tell your mama you gathered up some of her stuff," Che finally said. "Now who wants some pop?" I don't remember if we went to Speedy's or to the 7-Eleven to get pop or what flavor I got, but Che and I sang the whole way home to KTNN 660, the Navajo Nation radio station. We sang my favorite Navajo skip dance song about SpongeBob SquarePants by Talabaha. The water drum reverberated through the cab of the Chevy. Our voices blended in the melody. Che's smoky baritone tinged with the earnestness as he vocalized the deeper notes, and mine a boy's voice, a clear whistle and unmarked. Che looked over at me, holding my soda, my knees just barely over the edge of the passenger seat. I looked back at him, and he briefly took his hand off of the steering wheel and patted my head. "Leo, my boy." He turned to me, squinting his eyes, which unmistakably welled with tears. He blinked them back and exhaled his breath, escaping his mouth in a hard whoosh that resembled the sound of wind rushing through the cab of a vehicle with its windows down. All my memories hinged on my Che hinged on this one memory of us in his truck. And when my Che left this world, it seemed as if all the air had been vacuumed straight from my lungs. Che, this is the grandfather's perspective. Creator took my woman with a urine infection that spread to her kidneys. She just turned 54. A piss poor way to die, I'll tell you what. That isn't saying much on account of he screwed me over with bad kidneys. Fucking hurt dying. Those white nurses didn't even give a shit. There I was, sitting in the vinyl chair hooked up to the dialysis machine, spinning my blood like a damned cold slurry when it happened. A clot slipped its way between my body and my brain. At first, it was just my fingertips and my toes, but from there the sensation bloomed, prickling up my legs and thighs, chilling my extremities. Then it became thunderous, my body seizing in the throes of itself, as if being sucked into an undertow, the pressure and the pain pushing me deeper into my own agony, oceanic in depth, until I had been swallowed whole. Disoriented, I recalled the red brick of the California boarding school where I'd spent a year learning alphabets and fractions from teachers the color of fish bellies, and the sound of the ocean crashing against the shore in the distance, drowning out the tedium of graphite against scratch paper. Perhaps Indian boarding schools were Indian purgatory because no one knows how to make a hell better for Indians than Christians teaching us about their God. There is no torture greater than being asked to forget the taste of our own language. Between bars of soap and switches. So when the darkness came, I welcomed it, and I relished the disembodied coldness I'd become accustomed to as a miner. On the fourth day, a small glimmer appeared, and I walked towards it for what felt like miles. As I neared the glittering light, I glimpsed what appeared to be the front door of my trailer in the center of the glow. The whole seam rippled and expanded as I got closer. The edges of the glimmer buzzed and swarmed like a beehive with each breeze that shifted through the screen door of the trailer. This was a memory. Leopoldo stood alone on the front porch facing the door. I recognized his little buzz-cut bald head anywhere. My daughter, Melinda, strode out of the house, carrying a white laundry basket filled with Leo's things on her hip, and the screen door slapped behind her. She looks like her mother at her age, lean, unable to keep weight on, with legs as hard and fast as a jackrabbit's. Melinda crossed the porch, her long hair lapping her back in an inky black sheet. She reached for Leo's hand while balancing the white laundry basket on her free hip. His sun-brown arm threaded hers, connecting the pair. She walked Leo to her Geo Metro and opened the door for him. Leo's head barely cleared the dashboard of the car. She turned back to face me. "I'm not ready for him to come back with me," Melinda called, stepping over the squeaky part of the porch where the plywood had come up from the frame. "I don't have a babysitter set up. I'm still working graves." I'd crossed the porch to reach her. I pointed back to Leo's bedroom window. You should have seen the kid looking every which way for you. He needs his mama around. Melinda flinched as if I struck her, her eyes wide as if ready to bolt at any moment, but instead said, Mama and I needed you around, but you left us to see that bitch out in Farmington. Who are you to talk to me about leaving when you always had one foot out the door? Leo rolled a Hot Wheel car over the dashboard, his long eyelashes focused on the cherry red car Lily bought from him from one of those gumball machines. It was like watching Melinda leave for the first time again, except for this time she was taking Leo with her. Sure, he was 6, but sometimes when I looked at him just right, he looked as he did when he was an infant, milk drunk, his lips pursed into the shape of a rosebud, his nose still spotted with salt from his mother's womb. Despite his mother's resentment in carrying him, he was healthy. His arms and legs appeared segmented like a fleshy little beetle. He was spoiled, too. Lily carried him constantly on her hip as she cooked fried chicken in her cast iron pan, washed dishes. She carried that boy even when she fed the dogs. Caring for Leo weaved Lily and me back together again. He was our shuttle, threading between the strands of our disagreement and stamping us down till we fit flush. She invited me back to our bedroom. We held each other as we slept, like we did when we were young lovers before we conceived our Melinda, who came 2 weeks early, Lily's first child, my second child. Melinda always resented being second. Maybe this was Creator's errand for me, to fix things with my daughter. Leo. The first few years of living with Mama were like living with a moth. She flipped from work to home in short spurts, enough to teach me how to do the necessities, set my alarm clock, shower, brush my teeth, and catch the bus out in front of our apartment complex. I realized there was no going back to Cairns to live with my Che. High school went by in a flash. I made friends with Carter and Joseph, some boys I met who liked the same weird shit that I did, and visits to Che became infrequent. I took up a job at a local nonprofit. I lived with other college-age kids in a home lovingly dubbed the Con House. Despite all of that, I never got quite used to the winter. Winters didn't come gently in Utah. Winter consumed, swallowing up canyons and snapping tree trunks with heavy snow after seasons of drought. The dry cold made my knuckles fissure and bleed, weeping for no reason. I hated the nosebleeds most of all. The nosebleeds should have tipped me off that something was awry on that Tuesday in particular. Our group was at the Utah State Capitol. We'd gone and delivered letters in opposition to HB 371, which limited voting by mail in San Juan, Utah, effectively repressing the native vote. As the rest of my colleagues chatted over the policy, I'd gone to the men's bathroom because I could feel the nosebleed coming on. I walked down the white marbled halls with my hands held out as an offering, waiting for that first bloody drop. And when it came, it splattered across my palms, gleaming off the fluorescent overhead lights. By the time I made it to the bathroom, I'd accumulated a small puddle that seeped into the lines of my hands. I shuffled to the first stall, careful not to splash the blood everywhere, and gathered a wad of toilet tissue from the dispenser, winding the pale one-ply sheets around my hands, which soaked instantly, blooming into brilliant rosettes. Later that evening, back at home, I received a call from my mother, her voice as thick as gauze on the other end of the receiver. He died on the machine. The coroner said something about a blood clot. I kept expecting her to burst into tears like she did when Masana Luli died, but her tone stayed heavy. You okay, Ma? I don't know why he dragged us into this. What do you mean? I asked. My back against the bay window of the con house, the warmth of my body melting a silhouette into the frosted glass. I fingered the caulk grooves that connected the new plastic lining of the window to the frame, to the old crown molding from when this house was constructed in the early 1800s. I told him not to contact us, not for anything. I swallowed, the hard pit lodged in my throat. Outside, snow flurried down. Why would you say that? I asked. I hated that man. He betrayed all of us. What did Che do to warrant Mom's ungodly anger? Che. At 18, I discovered Desire's name was Celestia. I worked in Farmington, New Mexico with my cousins doing steelwork and welding. We started in the spring after the ground softened up and worked right up until the earth frosted over. Fucking hard work we did back then, hauling cinder blocks and rebar to sites, getting up framework for buildings that would become libraries, schools, things of that nature. It got hot too, our shirts sticking to our bodies and hardening into little shells like we were stink bugs on an errand. Our only respite was our lunch break. Some of us guys would load up into a truck and we'd stop at a place on Main Street called Fiesta Mexicana Restaurant. They made the best menudo in town. Fiesta Mexicana was a nice place back then, painted a bright yellow on the inside. It was always busy, crawling with construction workers off-site. Some came for food, but most came for Celestia. 3 years my senior, Celestia was the brightest body in all of Farmington. She wore her curly hair half up and half down, and throughout the day, the tendrils near her face would begin to stick to her forehead and neck. She wore a butter-colored uniform that reflected onto her skin and made her look like a Madonna. Perhaps the reason why the entire crew fantasized about her specifically was because she was the only brown woman around. Sure, we saw plenty of white women around the site, but they appraised us with dull eyes as if we were a herd of cattle. But Celestia, she took care of us by keeping our coffee cups full and laughing at even our dirtiest jokes. Somewhere between the hot bowls of menudo and stolen glances toward the kitchen, my affection for Celestia grew like emerging twilight stars. I could tell she liked me by how she'd linger by my end of the table, sometimes leaning in so close I could smell the powdery perfume that she'd applied to her pulse points. She took to taking smoke breaks during my lunch break so that I could order and we could eat lunch outside the restaurant, loading dock, or in my car. Her 15-minute breaks turned into 30-minute breaks. Her 30-minute breaks turned into visits to my apartment, where she de-shelled me of my uniform, and I traced the perfume to the center of her bare chest, filling my lungs with the scent of desert roses mixed with marbles and sweat. I can't recall how many lunches we spent like that, glistening like constellations in the din of her apartment bedroom, me palming Celestia's stomach from beneath as she faced her spiraled headboard adorned with floral pillowcases, our bodies mapping stories on that thin, striped mattress of hers. It all ended in early November when our white foreman's shovel hit the ground with an inevitable clunk. "Ground's frozen over," he pronounced. "Come back with me," I pleaded with Celestia during her smoke break. She waved me off. "No, I can't. I live here," she said, her eyes red with a lack of sleep. She brought a slim hand to her forehead, rubbing her brow. Celestia's cheeks appeared hollow, as if being consumed from the outside in. She ate sparingly, worrying that the free on-chef meals were working her figure. "I'll take care of you," I said, my chest swelling with warm promise. Smoke billowed out of her nose. "You're just a boy," Celestia said. "I can't live out there with your people. My place is here. My family is here." Leo. The morning after the news broke about Che, Mama filled her Buick to the brink with supplies. She squirreled 20-pound sacks of bluebird flour behind the wheel wells of her car, reasoning that it'll keep us from slipping off the road. Given that I wasn't up for an argument, I stacked her favorite steel nesting bowls, which were marked with her initials in red nail polish, so that greedy aunties wouldn't steal them. Unlike when Masana Lily died, Mama didn't cry, which concerned me. I'd forgotten her comment the day before. The valley of silence that hung between us felt generations old, filled with taboo topics and long-held secrets. Whatever Mama was withholding from me had been festering for years, and whatever it was, I feared the outfall. So rather than to engage with her, I trudged towards the house to collect the Coleman cooler she'd left in the basement. She'd fill the cooler with nearly 80 pounds of freezer meat. Since she worked in a meat plant, she was given a lot of beef, prime cuts mixed with whatever didn't sell well at the local grocery stores. Lugging the frozen meat up the stairs was not an easy task, but it was better suited for my stocky frame. We each had our talents, but it never failed to astound me how well Mom knew her way around a cut of beef. as if her knife-tip blade were led by Creator himself. It took her 30 minutes from start to finish to process a sheep. Ma's knowledge was practical, a skill in survival developed out of necessity, whereas my skills in animal processing were wanting. For Ma, butchering was second nature that extended beyond her job. Sometimes she didn't know it, but her words were like knife tips, and she, like no other woman, could sever my pride in an instant. Okay, let me just skip ahead. You breathe too much, Mama said, as I smeared my arms across the passenger windshield. That's not it. The temperature in the car is warmer than outside, causing the condensation. I tried to explain the science to her, but she wouldn't have it. No, you keep sighing like that, and it's fogging up the window. I scrunched my nose at my mom. I got a lot going on in my mind, and I'm sad about Grandpa. I didn't normally share my feelings with Mama. She rarely had the latitude to handle me at my best. You know, he used to leave Grandma and me for months on end, even when I was a little girl. Mama steadied her hand on the steering wheel. I didn't know that, I responded in almost a whisper. I'm sorry that happened, Ma. She rubbed her eyes with the back of her hands. He had a whole other family in Farmington, you know. The funny thing is that I didn't know that. And I'll just stop there.
I am so excited to introduce our next reader, Matty, Layne, Glasgow. So I once thought that nature writing was writing about beautiful, sublime landscapes where gadgets and gas stations did not exist. With time, though, I've realized that the nature-human binary is false, and a parking lot is as much a part of our natural landscape as a park. After all, maybe not counting the ocean, there is perhaps very little space on Earth untouched by human footprint. In his poetry collection, Deciduous Queen, Matty, Layne, Glasgow goes a step further and messes up that human-nature split by queering nature and presenting nature as a gorgeous mess, as complex and limitless as human sexuality. In Glasgow's poems, love, shame, betrayal, and sex coexist with snake tails and alligator teeth. Poet Heidi Seaborn says, people and trees are entwined as Glasgow reimagines human nature from our soiled roots to our lofty limbs. Deciduous Queen is a stunning collection with language that is vulnerable, brash, inventive, and complex, and his most recent poems are equally marvelous. My students and I were fortunate to have Matty visit my creative writing workshop last semester, and I'm really excited about community workshops that he will be teaching in April, that you all are welcome to join for free. I'll send out an email about that in the next few weeks. Matty, Layne, Glasgow is a research fellow in the Tanner Humanities Center and a PhD candidate in literature and creative writing at the University of Utah. Deciduous Queen was the winner of the 2018 Benjamin Saltman Award. His poems and essays have appeared in multiple platforms, including Crazy Horse and the Houston Public Media. Among other venues, Glasgow has taught poetry in the Utah prison facilities, and he has worked with the National Alliance of Mental Illness to provide therapeutic writing workshops. I'm so pleased and honored to welcome Matty, Layne, Glasgow.
Thank you, Ranjan, and thank you, Stacy, for that beautiful reading. It's a privilege to share this space with you and with everyone who's here with us. It was a very generous introduction, Ranjan. Are you sure you read this book? I am trying to do. So I'm going to read a few poems from Deciduous Queen today, and then I'm going to read some newer work. And as Ranjan mentioned, a lot of my work is interested in queerness and environment. But this first book did come out of like the loss of my mother. I don't really want to read an elegy for her, so I'm going to read a poem about a goose that bit her. And it is called Silly Goose. I recently drew a map of my childhood, a cul-de-sac on the edge of a great lake, a bench beneath an old oak, a feather-dusted shoreline where I craved more than breadcrumbs or confit de canard. One summer night, I held stale bread between my fingers, like crusted sandpaper, so dry, mallards and geese quacked, "Bitch, please," squawked, "Hell nah," until Mama's scream pierced the flutter of feathers, and I saw a pair of white wings spread wide and shimmer in the street lamp. The goose lowered his head, and his bristled beak tore right through her pantyhose. I remember how everything fell in the shadows. Handfuls of bread on the grass, Mama's blood dripping from her calf to the shore's plumage. It's strange how things that belong somewhere always seem so violent, out of place, like soft wingless feathers or a hunger for the wrong kind of flesh. So when I was meeting with the students last semester, we talked about things we didn't like about poetry, that it can be like boring and pretentious. So I'm going to try my best not to do that today. And that's going to require some audience involvement. So you're going to have a little bit of a choose your own adventure for many of the poems, starting now. Would we like a poem? It's going to be a thirst poem either way. Would we like a poem about Captain Planet or glory holes? Glory holes. Okay. I appreciate the passion and the energy of that choice. This poem is called All Afternoon. Yesterday, I built a glory hole, but no one came. So I knelt alone without a claim. My eyes on the clean tile floor, the wall unstained. What's a boy to do with such shame, kneeling hollow-jawed in a duct tape frame? I crooned, "A hole is a hole," all afternoon, a sinful hymn to fan some flamer's flame. There was no pilgrimage, no seaman monsoon strewn hard-pressed against that holy wall, just an empty ark, an unanswered call. Blame anonymity, but we'll make this stall a relic today. I've got to untame your body. So come on, lean in, lay claim. When you can't see the face, it's all the same. That is a sonnet. I'm not sure if that matters, but I felt like it could be helpful in understanding. I'm going to read the last poem from this book and then move on to some newer work. This is a poem called Bayou Baby. It is about Hurricane Harvey, or inspired by the events that occurred in 2017 in Houston. I was not living there at the time. I was in Iowa pursuing my MFA, but my father and my partner and his families were all living there. So this is kind of inspired by conversations we were having with them through that period before we moved back to Houston. Bayou Baby, Hurricane Harvey, August 27th, 2017. 1. When I was a child, I followed a nutria up out the ditch, which is to say we came from the same place. My little hands smeared muddy paw prints. My fingers sunk into a water-swept incline. I couldn't catch up to those buck teeth, to that gray fur and snake tail all awash in ocean rain. I said, "Bye, you." I asked, "Where you going?" I said, "I'm scared of this water, too." 2. A woman rose from that soggy refuge, orchid bloom and alligator teeth in her dirty blonde hair. I called her mother. I asked Mama, "Where you been?" I said, "I just want to stay by you." Her eyes were the severe green of that dangerous sky. Her body was covered in ocean, water so dirty it glistened like a silver gown. She said, "I'm going to wear this storm out." 3. I learned to love a man the same way I love the bayou. I got used to his beauty. How much can you take for me? How much will you hold before you crest? I know you just want to protect me. I can't stay. 4. There are 2 dried petals and 13 teeth on my daddy's mantle. He just sits at home alone, waiting for the dirty water to rise, to bring all that death to his front porch. He'd welcome it inside too, if he didn't love sitting in the rain so much. And he'd leave if he could walk on water, if he had somewhere else to go. 5. There's a tuft of gray fur atop the fence out back, a thin-scaled tail that hangs and dips in the silver flow. A voice escapes those buck teeth. Where are you going? It asks. By you. So my first book ends with a rat, a nutria, and my next book is very interested in bestial queerness, especially bear identity within gay culture. Are we familiar with bears and grizzly bears? Okay, so I'll start with a poem that is interested in those types of bears, and then you'll have some more agency and choice in the poems after that, I promise. Hey Bear, Centennial Valley, 2023. As we hike along Odell Creek, we chant informal salutations. I long to reach out with dear, though here that may cause some confusion. Dear Bear, a greeting becomes an inventory. Oh, thank you. No one ever laughs at that part, and that's one of my favorite lines. But this is an epistle, a warning for things we long to see, but never to encounter. M tells us park rangers at Yellowstone once lured bears to auditoriums with trash. Parents at Yosemite made honeypots of their children's faces. Up the trail, Jay raps, I've got my mind on my honey, and my honey on my mind. Our brains are stuck on an idea. We pine for fur. Each June, Salt Lake City hosts Bearvasion. They fly in from all over. They lumber down from Big and Little Cottonwood. I'm no ranger, but that must take a lot of trash. I'm at the club, pockets full of berries, hair tangled with moths, raw honey slathered on my fuzzy cheek. A tonal distinction. We emerge from the forest in a meadow, yell, hey, bear. At Club Verse for Bear Prom, we wink, hey, bear. We're calling out for something. We're trying to keep them away. I can love someone and understand the distance we must keep between us. Darling bear, claw marks, I'm where you once were. Okay, a choice. Mariah Carey's Lambs or Shepherd's Pie? Okay, this is a crowd I can get behind, thank you. That's the right choice. This is titled Lambs Canyon or Lambs Canyon. Has anyone been to Lambs Canyon? I'm very fascinated by the plural and the possessive. It is never consistent. So that's the title of this poem. There are no lambs here, perhaps unsurprisingly. All off listening to Mariah, no doubt. Some hero, some butterfly, a sweet fantasy. I imagine them nonetheless, throats undulating their afternoon songs beneath the yellowing aspens, drawn here by a word and its uncertainty, their newness, their possession of this space between mountains, their creek flowing. I roll down the window to listen, to see what is here, rain, sleet, trees, color. The smell of burning forest leads me up canyon, past a handful of emergency vehicles, past men in their rain gear and their Forest Service trucks, past trees losing themselves, all red and gold and amber as embers. The road ends. 3 pillars of smoke rise high along the western ridgeline, narrow plumes emerging like knitted wool from the green conifers, until that too disappears into the clouds that slink low and quiet as age. Okay, this is more fun. Mutton bustin' or animal husbandry? Some message. Okay, we'll go with that one. Oh, and before I read this one, my partner and I are doing really well. Not every speaker and every poem represents the current situation of those people. I'm glad he's not here for this. Husbandry. He seems to want a ring because he asks, "Where's my ring?" "You want me to husband you?" you ask him, to which he nods and says, "Yes, I do." At least he gets to say the words this once. We made husband from a house and a man who occupies the field, who tills the soil. You've called some men master, for more you were dirt to be plowed. You want to husband me, you ask him, and he says, I do, I want to husband you. You consider your resourcefulness. If you are the soil, you try to grow for him. If you are a man and a house, you bring him rooms and a coldness to fill them. The you in your arms bleats as you caress her nape, as you look to him. You think she whispers, nah, and you appreciate her advice. You agree, knowing you're both men and thus animals. Your mind cradles this notion of domestication until the you hops from your shaking arms and trots right out of the living room, her work here done. She thinks you're both idiots, but you especially, because she wasn't saying nah. She was saying there's a difference between care and cultivation. The ewe's milk is chilling in the fridge, some cheese too. Do you want some Roquefort and honey, honey? He nods. When you return with the plate, he surveys the field of you, its future blooms, and mistakes the sweetness glazing each crumble. Okay, final sensual choice, spit roasting or edging? Did I hear spit roasting? Okay. I just like making y'all say these words. It's more fun for me. This is called barbecue, and it is ostensibly based on an actual pig roast I went to in Staten Island, to be fair. But there's obviously more than that going on here. Before they made a swine of me, there was a moment. Drawn blinds afforded a crevice of light. Teeth clung to a pair of shorts, damp with summer. So many hands, my own bound. I was an animal kept in the dark by men. There are many ways to have a feral beast, even more spaces to fill, one who refuses the apple. Still, waiting, I watch them appear in the thick shine of afternoon, a clavicle adjacent to a sinewy shoulder, the ridge of an Adonis belt dipping from hip to pelvis, a belly, round and burly, glazed with fur. There's something to be said here of flesh and possession. Outside, the world crackled and groaned. The flames rose to kiss a makeshift spit. I was afraid of fire. There are many ways to burn a man. A piece of meat requires turning. I learned then to beg without language, to practice each noise for more. There's something to be said here of the insatiable. I could have fed them for days. I wanted to be fed, and I did, and was. I still am. I'm just going to read two more, and then I'll leave you be. Actually, just one more, because it's a longer poem. I was good friends with Kanan Inse, who was a professor at this university, and they really introduced me to the queer community in Salt Lake City, and we spent a lot of time in the Wasatch Front together. So their loss last summer was really surprising and quite jarring, and this is an elegy for them. Pastoral elegy. We are in a canyon on the ridge of old rock, rising up beside a stream, chasing waterfalls, against age-old advice. We queer everything around us, each leaf, each clump of scat, twisting or aflutter in their own kind of endless transformation. I pause for a breath on the way up the mountain, suckle at the blue teat of my camelback. See, even here it's also sensual, so animal, this polyurethane reservoir, this bladder. Such inverse possibilities, the world held on our backs, an organ worn outside our bodies. You notice these things, words, their silliness, a sound's gentle suggestion. It's a spring day in Mill Creek. Two newly hatched rattlers shake their shit at us on our way back down the trail. I scream, this is a true story. And you might say something like, at least they gave us a warning, honey. So sweet. You're right. They're afraid too. Reptilian worry in a baby's dance, her budding song. Look at us there now. Two queens scared of a little snake. A new sensation for us both, I imagine. We queer everything around us until we agree it all already is. The world's beauty in its strangeness, ours too. So often we are leaving the city in search of quiet splendor. We return whole. Each misstep, each bloodied knee on our descent as it's meant to be. Sometimes there is no warning. Sometimes we just fall. No pre-climb jam session to our favorite girls. No hike like a dance with any trail. What I'd do differently then if I'd heard your rattle now? Nothing. Everything. It's too easy to say, I miss you. You made us better than we are. The trees are in their best drag, all red-lipped and gaudy gold in autumn light. Look, sweet maples, scrubby oaks, our precious aspens, quaking. They all can't help but miss you too. Thank you all so much.
Let's keep the applause going for a while. Stacey and Matty, thank you so much. That was wonderful. So we do have about 10 minutes for conversation, questions, answers, or questions from the audience.
I approach it from the fact that we are always on indigenous land. And so I think that one part about writing about Utah as a Native American woman is to kind of showcase, yes, our stories are set in Utah, they're occurring in Utah, past, present, since time immemorial, and they will continue to do this. I have one story that's set in my hometown of Smithfield, and it's kind of science fiction. And so I kind of wanted to put us, we are a through line. And there was a recent short story collection that I read where all of the European Americans get on ships and they leave the earth because they've essentially destroyed it. And then all the natives just sit there. And I kind of like to think of our kind of connection to this earth and this land particularly, because there is nowhere else to go back to. This is it. This is it.
That's a beautiful answer. I'm not sure I have much to add to that, other than I am generally inspired by wherever I'm living and the environments that I find myself in, and tend to try to spend a lot of time out of the city and in what we would call a natural landscape, just because I find it soothing. But I think Stacey brings up a good point that we are on native land, and I think in my poetry, I don't reckon with that idea quite as well. In my nonfiction, I have done some more work, and I think it's easier in the essay form to really interrogate the history of the land and what has been done to it and who it has been taken from. But I do think that's something that should be important to any environmental writing, to acknowledge that whose land this is.
And then especially just like Utah in general, with like our very large like pioneer heritage. I went to school here in Utah, and sometimes there'd be a sense of erasure, like, you still exist? And I'm like, yeah, I'm here, and I wrote a book, come buy it. Yeah.
Everyone should buy the book.
I would just like to thank you, Matty, for reading the elegy for John. It was dear to many of us. And I wondered, while you were reading, if there was anything in the elegy or in any of your other poems that was inspired by Kanan's poetry.
I mean, a lot of the poems themselves that take place in any of the mountains in Utah were experiences I shared with them. And so I think even if they aren't appearing as a character or someone in the poems, they certainly inspire and live in those poems. And I also, having read their full manuscript, loved their poetry so much, and they were such a great artist, and so formally gifted and deconstructing a lot of the really problematic narratives that we have on gender and race, and really was such a great advocate for the community. I can't say that those instances make it into all of my poetry, but those are certainly things that I think about every time that I think about them. And I'm writing about the way that they lived as a human being, which was quite inspiring for me.
So we do have a bunch of creative writing today. Just a more of a general question to both of you. You both are incredibly young writers, but if you could go back to your younger writing self, what would you tell them?
I'm just honored to be young again. I don't think of I mean, I would just say keep writing. I think as a young writer, you can be very self-conscious, and you can be worried about what everyone is going to think about your work or how your work is going to fit into certain movements. And I think the most important thing for students in like an intro class or who are in their first couple of years is just to produce and enjoy what you're writing. Do not write for anyone other than yourself. Your professor should give you like advice, but you shouldn't write for them either. I will tell you, like that kind of establishes who you are as a writer and helps you find your way. And I don't like this idea of productivity, like we have to be producing so much, but like write when you can and write what you enjoy. And read a lot.
I think my advice would be to, wow, I should have really thought about this some more, sorry. My advice would be to like take all the shots you can, not in an alcohol way, but like in like, you know, I would go on to like new pages or poets and writers, and I would just see what was there, and I would just scroll, and I'd be like, is there anything that I'm working on that I could submit to this? And like the worst thing that they can tell me is no. Like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people generally our age are very familiar with rejection, like just like through our very like virtual lives, like online and stuff like that. So if people told me no, I'd be like, okay, fine. That you and like 10 other people told me no. But all the times that people accepted my work and my work was placed somewhere, it first of all helped to give me confidence as a writer to be like, the things that I am writing are meaningful and purposeful, and people want to read them. And also, it gave me a portfolio to expand upon, so that when I was like approaching like my publisher, I had some things to be like, look, like I can put out work. Other things are I guess just like don't listen to the naysayers. I graduated from Utah State University, and I remember
one of my professors was like, "Why are you majoring in English?" And it like really hurt at the time, but like, I don't know, now I feel I'm a very vindictive person, and so I was just like, where's your book, sir? Like, so I don't know, prove people wrong, submit. Worst thing people can tell you is no.
Love that.
I'm sort of formulating a question about intersections. Like, for example, the mother's blood from being bit by a goose going into the water, or the like dance song that was about SpongeBob, right? Like, are these things that you discover through an improvisational like free write, or do you know about them and then build around them as images? Because they're really effective. I feel like they intersect things that we don't expect.
Yeah.
I guess I could say, like, I just describe my writing in general as like a journey in tone, and so like we're going through lots of different registers. So I wouldn't say that like I built the poem around that specific image. I think what originally drew me to that poem was like the humor and silliness of the situation. But then through revision, when I could see kind of the arc of the book really being about navigating that loss, I did probably focus more on that blood dropping because it kind of foregrounds what's going to be revealed later in the book, and in regards to her death. So I think it was certainly not in our first draft. I think that came later, that kind of began to haunt the humor that originally like started the poem.
SpongeBob Skip Dance song was a song that I listened to growing up. Like, it would sometimes come on the station, and my grandpa would sing to it, and I'd sing along with it, and it was a very like cute memory that I had. But also, there's like a lot of there's events called like song and dance where elders will go and gather, and they'll bring like a water drum and they'll just sing songs, but some of them are so contemporary, like they're about Superman or Minnie Mouse or Mickey Mouse or SpongeBob, or like I think there was one that was by like a Navajo younger singer, and she sang about like a K-pop idol, and so I really liked this idea of combining contemporary interests with, I guess, like our traditional values or our traditional practices. I just thought it was fun, and I think it was a good song to illustrate this connection that this grandfather had and his grandson connecting in this moment today.
I'm actually glad you asked that question because it came up in my creative writing class today when we were talking about incongruity. So the prompt was, think about 5 things that you've lost recently and write a short narrative about that. And it could be, the things that they've lost could range from anything from a pair of shoes or a quarter to losing a partner or a family member. And so my students were like, well, it doesn't fit, doesn't go together. But that was the whole point, because sometimes when you combine things that are not intrinsically supposed to be linked together, it could throw up all kinds of surprises. Yeah. And so, and interesting tension. But yeah, that's something that really stood out to me in your work as well.
Matty, I have a question for you. I'm interested in the pun in your work as a write out of the pun, or do you discover the pun usually like as you're writing?
Oh, Garrett.
Oh, that
I'm just kidding. I will tell you, one of my professors at my MFA was like, you're like Elvis Costello, Matty, you'll just do anything for a pun. And I was like, so I guess at that time I was using too many puns. So I think at this point, I try to be more spare with them. But I do think that it depends on the poem. Sometimes like that like double meaning or play on words is what like inspires like that dissonance and incongruity that we're talking about. And like and that kind of goes into camp as well. Like something can be funny and serious simultaneously, and that's what I'm very much interested in, especially kind of, I guess in all of my work overall, this kind of, we feel multiple things often either up against one another or at the same time. And I think, so the pun is like one of the easiest vehicles to kind of navigate that. And then sometimes like in a draft, like maybe a new pun will arise, or I will write a poem and not even recognize the pun, and then someone will be like, you're so inappropriate. And I'll be like, not even on purpose there. Like it just comes out of me. I don't know.
Might have time for one more.
I was thinking about blood. In your short story, you wrote about a grandpa passed on because of blood clots. And at the same time, the grandson was having nose bleeding. I thought I kind of got it. So what you wanted to say, that maybe I might have misunderstood it. So could you share with us what is the idea behind that?
Yeah.
Blood clots of grandpa and nose bleeding song, which seemed to take place at the same time in your story.
Yeah. I've never made that connection. I should have. I was like, oh wow, that's so cool. I think that with the grandson, it's just like I was just like really into him. Like Utah, like just sucks in the winter, and it's just so cold, and like everything's drying out, and you get nosebleeds. And then with the grandfather and the blood clot, it was based. My grandfather passed in the same way. He was getting a dialysis session or whatever, and the nurses walked away, and when they came back, he was dead. He was gone. And before that, he was a uranium miner. And so I was kind of thinking of this like kind of how like coal mining or that sort of process works with like the slurry and like the processing of that and how much that like wears on the body. And I wanted to put something that it was similar to, I guess, the function that the coal mine carried out, but like into his death. So it's like it is this blood clot, this thing that was supposed to, sustain him and help him survive, that slips between him, like his brain, and he passes. And so I wouldn't say that the nosebleed and the blood clot were necessarily intentional, but the blood clot was intentional I was hoping to critique like uranium mining and just like mining industry.